We're talking about rape culture, sexual assault in the music industry. Actually, there was a Chicago Tribune article released on March 29th, 2017 by Jesse Rhodey that actually put Our Music, My Body at the forefront after they had conducted a survey from festival and music goers about how they want to feel safer in the scene and what makes them feel unsafe. And it was found that more than 92% of females have experienced harassment in music venues or at music festivals. So that's sort of what we want to address, especially with a lot of different things that have happened in the past few months when it comes to sexual assault, rape, and harassment in our music industry.
Welcome to Emo Social Club Podcast, episode 3-ish. So we're welcoming Matt and Maggie from Our Music, My Body. Do you guys just want to go ahead and introduce yourselves? We said that we might ask some questions of ourselves, but then I immediately said I don't want to do that. No, go ahead. Matt, why don't you go first and just tell us your name, what you do, and I guess we'll go with karaoke song. I'll think of a better one by the time it gets to me.
My name is Matt Walsh. I'm the co-campaign coordinator of Our Music, My Body, as well as a prevention educator at Between Friends, which is a domestic violence agency in Chicago. So I primarily go to middle schools and high schools and talk about dating. And my go-to karaoke song is probably Zero by the Smashing Pumpkins.
Whoa.
Game time decision. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
I sang it to you like
That
a
is
minute
true.
ago.
That is true.
So it's like I got to do it.
Yeah. Which is why I don't believe you when you say you don't do karaoke.
No karaoke.
So my name is Maggie Arthur. I also lead Our Music, My Body with Matt. And in addition to that, I am a prevention educator with Resilience, the agency formerly known as Rape Victim Advocates. We are arguably the biggest rape crisis agency in Chicago. And I spend similarly a lot of my time with little kids talking about consent and their bodies. And I handle in Our Music, My Body a lot of the like volunteer and training and stuff. And my go-to karaoke song lately has been Mother by Danzig.
There you go.
Does
but
your
I
mom
have
know
lots
that?
more. I'm sure she would be really proud.
I mean, we don't really have to introduce ourselves, but
What's up?
hey, we're still the kids from Emo Social Club.
Yeah.
Lizzie, what do you sing at karaoke?
Oh man, when my friends allow me to stay long enough to sing for karaoke, when we go out, I usually go for All Time Low's Dear Maria Count Me In, or literally any Fall Out Boy song because that's the only thing that I can perfectly scream sing and not fuck up.
Yeah. And I'm Brian, and I have a band, so I do karaoke all the time. Anyway, so
my life is karaoke.
my life is actual karaoke.
I love that he lives and breathes karaoke.
I'm in a cover band. I feel like that is karaoke.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
I will
You're
sell
not wrong.
myself very short for the majority of my talents.
We're proud of you.
Guys, welcome to our third podcast. So, this
for
is our
having us.
first interview with guests. And today we wanted to have you guys on this episode because our previous episode, we talked a bit about the Me Too movement, how the movement hasn't really garnered a ton of attention within the music industry as far as these artists are being called out for what they do, but they aren't necessarily being shut out of the music industry in the same way that the movie industry or the TV industry has with people like Harvey Weinstein or Louis C.K., who's been in the news all of this week as well. So, there are people within those industries that have been shut out from their careers, and everyone said that these people are no longer allowed to keep their jobs. But we haven't necessarily seen the same thing within the music industry. I think last week we brought up Chris Brown, R. Kelly, what's his name? Ronnie Radke.
Yeah, Ronnie Radke, William Francis from
Yeah.
Aiden and William Control.
So these are musicians who people still listen to. I guess one that is probably the main one that's affected the emo culture, from being a huge, icon in it to becoming sort of like, I don't know if he's a pariah. I don't know where we really stand on it, but, Jesse Lacey from Brand New, was a really big story when it happened, that all of a sudden the Me Too movement had hit sort of closer to a smaller group of people, a smaller subculture. Um, and yet whenever we go and play shows, or when you're at an event, where there's a DJ playing emo music, people still request Brand New. And of course, a lot of people don't play it anymore, but there's still fans of their music. There's still fans of Jesse Lacey who want to hear their music. And I mean, we sort of felt like that's done, but apparently there are still fans of music of people who have sexually assaulted, sexually harassed, you know, solicited minors and those sort of things. Do you guys have any thoughts on like why the music industry doesn't necessarily want to cancel these people? Want to say that you aren't allowed, we're not going to play your music anymore, we're done with you, you know, fired from your job or fired from your role or anything like that?
Yeah, it's rape culture. The
Ooh.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there a lot of times when we talk about these things, like folks want to know, like, what do they all have in common? Like, what do they, how are they all like these monsters or whatever? And it's like there's no such thing as like, I don't know, like a predator gene or
Mhm.
something. It what they have in common is that they all exist within this culture and the society that has chosen to ignore their actions,
Mhm.
or even excuse them or laugh them off, and simultaneously chosen to like blow off the people who are accusing them,
Mhm.
and sort of focus their negative energy on the folks who've been harmed instead. And arguably TV and movies and all of that are existing in that same culture. But you're absolutely right. Somehow musicians kind of get a pass because I think a lot of times they have this like, bad boy image or whatever. And so it's like, oh well, that's expected. And also to the women who are affected by that, like they put themselves in that position or they allowed themselves to be that close to them or
Mhm.
whatever. It's like this understanding that like they're gonna be bad, so don't put yourself in the line of fire.
Mhm.
And we like oftentimes are thinking about this like power dynamic as well, that uh these celebrities like have this power, and how are they influencing other people, and how are they pressuring other people, and how are they continuing to silence other people. And I think with musicians we so often are like, oh well, like this is their life, but then they're in this band and it's like we're like doing this like separating them, like the art from the person, which is all this like bullshit, especially when you listen to like various artists and they are singing about relationships. Like
Mhm.
it's not like we're like I'm like singing about, I don't know, whatever, and then I'm doing this like harmful thing. It's like, no, like you're singing about these relationships and you have this vision of what a relationship is that is harmful, and you're continuing to perpetuate these ideas of like stalking and pressuring and being harmful, and this like inequality that goes completely ignored. And people are like, oh, I can just sing along to this because within rape culture, we see these views of like jealousy and stalking and predatory behavior as cute or positive, because it's like, oh, well, if you call me 100 times, it's because you really care about me, not because you are creepy or like doing something that is controlling. Because this is all about like power and control. And like that's the baseline of it.
All right.
So how would you we've used rape culture, a large term that we've heard a lot recently. How would you define that? And how would you also define sexual assault as just an overall definition, like a definition? Like when I was in college, we started having to do sexual assault and rape modules that were like 2 to 4 hours long that helped us understand what rape, yes or no, was. And at least for me, because this was when it started to develop a little bit more as a larger awareness, there was people who were saying, even if you are in a relationship and you say yes first, but then you say no later because something made you uncomfortable, that is still technically rape or assault, which a lot of myself and my friends were not aware of. So how would you put a better definition to it? So people understand, because I also got a lot of people who came up to me and said, I think that's stupid. that is not rape. And it's like, that sounds like it though. Now in this new perspective, it sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, I well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I would say the definition, because this is literally my job. The definition of rape culture that I use a lot when I'm teaching, is a culture or community that chooses to excuse or ignore sexual violence. Do you have anything you would add to that?
I think that that's like the basic definition, but if you like want examples of it, it's like what we were just saying. It's like where a movie like when I was growing up, we were always like in all of my like gender studies classes, we were like shown Twilight, where it's
Mm.
like the guy is
Ugh.
just sort of like throwing himself on the woman, and we're just supposed to be like, oh, that's cute. Where it's like, no, this is not appropriate. There's no consent there. So what rape culture does is normalizes these views of relationships and the views of behavior to think that it's like okay, and we're like forgetting that their consent needs to take place when you're like crossing somebody's like physical or emotional boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, like every single movie that has a sex scene is just like you're like thrown against a wall, and there's heavy breathing, and it's like all happening so fast, and like not only is that not realistic just in general, but
Mhm.
also that's like really glorifying the absence of consent.
Yeah.
It's making the lack of consent look like hot, which is problematic. And then like kids learn that, and then that's what they think is supposed to happen. And I can't tell you how many times like I've been in a classroom where like a student has said something to that effect of like, well, that it would be like weird if I asked beforehand, like it would ruin it. I'm like, but what about like when you just have a vibe or whatever? It's like it's all, and it's not coming from like their, brain. It's coming from their like consuming all
Mhm.
of these
Mm.
images.
And what we typically say in the classroom is like, what would be worse, like asking someone and then saying no and like feeling a little uncomfortable, or or not asking and just like going in for the kiss or the whatever, and then pulling away and being like, ooh, gross, I did not want to do that at all. And like then it like begins to start shifting in their brain. And these conversations about consent and like what our music my body does and what like myself and Maggie teach in the world, it's about this like culture shift. Like we know that when we say consent or like rape culture for the first time, it's not like boom, we're fixed. It's like there needs to be these constant conversations within the home, within the classroom, within the community to be changing this.
Yeah.
And also in the music scene,
Yeah.
the music festivals and venues.
And I would the only thing I would add to that too is that like people's perceptions of like when they hear rape culture or hear rape even, they're like, ugh. Like that's
Mm.
I don't want to talk about that. That's gross. That's separate from me.
Mhm.
Like people's perceptions of like who can cause that sort of harm is like this like I don't know, image of like this monster. And in reality, the people who are causing harm are the people we know and love. And they're part of the reason they're getting away with it is because we don't see them as a monster, right? They don't fit the image, and also too because we have a lack of understanding around consent. Just like what you were saying, like this idea that like consent is this or that is like not realistic to our human experiences most of the time. And so then that leaves like a lot of confusion. And so part of the culture shift too is acknowledging like everyone is capable of causing harm, just like everyone is capable of being harmed. And like what's more important is thinking about like how do we do the right things so that we're not hurting each other anymore.
I think that makes sense.
It's a good
I
broad
don't understand
definition and
why.
like better, explanation of it for a lot of people. I feel that's really helps it because I know there's a lot of people out there who think, oh, it's always a man, and that's
Mhm.
totally false. Women, anybody of any type of gender is able to cause this harm to anybody.
Yeah, that was what we saw this week. I feel like the Me Too movement has been primarily in movies and that we, talking about it as a music thing, it is more towards people that are going to music festivals and happening to them there rather than celebrities and other celebrities, with the Ozzy Argento stuff that's been coming out this week and sort of the culmination of people that are speaking out against people who have sexually assaulted. And now it's like, oh, but she also sexually assaults, and saying, but two things can be negative at the same time. You don't
Mhm.
have to say that this person is putting themselves above everyone else because they've been sexually assaulted. They're saying, "Hey, I was sexually assaulted," and then finding out that she was sexually assaulting someone else is not necessarily to say that her sexual assault was okay. That Harvey Weinstein raping her was not okay just
Mhm.
because she also reacted in that way. But I guess, yeah, I think that maybe that there's a sort of disconnect between the fact that it is celebrities and maybe even seen as like a tabloid article saying these are what celebrities are doing and it's happening to these celebrities, and that the Me Too movement is kind of focused on that. Even though, of course, the Me Too movement started with a woman who's almost never talked to anymore about the Me Too subject.
Exactly.
But
Or
then when
there
Can we
or
just name who that is?
yeah, see, that's the problem. Is like I've
it
heard it
was it
all
was
week.
Asia Argento and Rose McGowan, but because Rose McGowan also had, I think she was charged with like cocaine possession
Mhm.
and went to rehab, everyone was like, "Oh, she just must be fueled on drugs and saying things."
Yeah,
So that's
but
pretty
there,
much how it.
But Tanara
yeah,
Burton?
Tanara Burton, yeah,
Tirana.
Tarana Burton. See, I'm like I feel bad because I've heard her name so much this week, like reading about and hearing about Ozzy Argento's subject, and that people are saying that Ozzy Argento and Rose McGowan were like the spokeswomen of the Me Too movement, and then them saying, "Well, no, it was this woman, Tanara Burton,
Tarana Burke.
Tarana Burton." See,
We
I am
found it. We
I am
found it.
sorry to the audience. They're
Right,
listening to me
But
fail.
it's
everyone.
like we all are like learning and growing, and
Mhm.
like it's important to recognize that like specifically that this is a woman of color that has been
Mhm.
pushed off to the side, and
Yeah.
like so to be like, hey, I don't actually know this name, but I know that we're missing something is part of that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean the fact that like when she I don't even want to say like created, because that wasn't her, like her purpose was not to
Mhm.
get attention around it necessarily. Her purpose was to build community among individuals like in real life.
Mhm.
And so that also creates like another interesting layer of like now it's like all over the media and everybody's talking about it and all this, and was is her purpose really being fulfilled, you know? I don't know. I mean, like from hearing her in interviews and stuff, like she is happy about it. She's happy that there's like bigger community, but you know, who knows if that was like how she imagined her life. Because now also too, no matter what she does in her life, she will always be like the one who did the Me Too thing. You
Yeah.
know, so like that's a
True.
whole other thing.
I know that she's been asked for a lot of commentary on the Ozzy Argento, Rose McGowan stories that have been coming out lately, and of course, I believe her statement was to say that sexual assault, sexual harassment in any form is wrong. Should be, we should be listening to victims who say that I was sexually harassed, I was, raped by this person, and I think that's where she's mostly pushing it, pushing the conversation rather than saying, making it this tabloid fair,
Right.
where
She's
everybody's
not naming names. She's saying a broad generalization.
right. So on the topic of the Me Too movement, how has your message changed in the way that you communicate, what you're communicating about the music industry to people? Has it changed anything about how you're speaking about it? Has it changed any part of your message?
So for us, the Me Too movement was just this like normalization, this like public normalization of sexual violence that we have been seeing daily. Like,
Yeah, we're like, oh,
cool.
welcome.
Like, oh, like, hi, like we've been here, we've been telling you about this. Like, thanks for finally listening. So I think that the Me Too movement for us is just like another way to be like, hey, so that thing that everyone's now talking about, this like buzzwordy thing, like we're here to help. It's like we were actually here 3 years ago, but you weren't listening to us because you didn't think it was a problem. So for us, it's like just sort of like a key to like get into like open another door. But we have knowing about this, I'm gonna keep going with this like door metaphor, but like we've been knocking on people's doors, like being like, hey, like we're ready to talk about this. We want to talk about this. And I think the one thing with the Me Too movement is now like the cause and effect is like festivals like or venues like 3 or 4 years ago were like, we don't have this problem. And we're like, we think you do. They're like, well, we haven't heard about it. And then now that the Me Too movement has like normalized it and made people feel more comfortable talking about the violence that they're experiencing, you'll hear from festivals like, "Oh, we did just have this report." And they're like, "All right, now who do we call? What do we do?" So like we want it to be preventative. We want to be there, and some festivals or some venues are now definitely more reactive to this issue.
Well, like, even The Guardian back in 2017 wrote a report about the Swedish festival called Brazilla, and they had over 27 sexual assaults during their one weekend. So from, like, a Friday to Sunday, and they just straight up canceled it because they couldn't figure out what to do. So, but I see, at least here, we see you guys going to different music festivals. Like, you guys just went to Firefly
Mhm.
Music Festival, and you guys did Lollapalooza, and you did Riot Fest last year, and you're going back to Riot Fest this year too?
Yeah, we'll be there.
Awesome. So I think it's really good that you guys are being able to say this is what you're supposed to do. So music festivals aren't like, "Oh my god, this happened. We're just gonna straight up cancel because we didn't think about this."
Yeah, and I feel like that is a really great example of when you choose to like just blatantly ignore a problem and then you can't anymore and their reaction is just like, "Whoa, what's happening? Like what do? We have to cancel this because like we never saw this coming." And instead of understanding like this problem has existed and does exist, and so like prepare yourself to deal with it when it bubbles to the surface, which is what we are trying to do.
And it's important to name that so many of these festivals are just run by men and like primarily white men. And like we know that men, like myself included, or like have ignored this issue, don't realize that this is a problem, and it's just like, oh well, this is a woman's issue, like, and oftentimes women don't feel comfortable going to men because they aren't gonna like be supportive. So then that happens. So men are like, "Oh, I didn't know about this," and it's like, "No shit, you didn't know about this because you've like haven't created a space for women to feel comfortable in your workplace to come and be like, hey, I'm worried about this thing." So that is another reason that is like part of that rape culture conversation, and these gender roles that we're trying to actively challenge.
Yeah, I dudes have this perception that like if they're not actively contributing to the harm, then they're good
And then
dudes.
they're preventing
And
it.
yeah, and it's like that's just not true. Like in order to really feel like you are absolved from this problem, you have to be like shouting from the mountaintop that it is a problem, as well as just like not being a creep. Like that's
Literally.
level 1,
Yeah.
don't be a jerk. And level 2 is actually support the people who are like trying to do the work.
And we see that a lot, at least in the emo scene now, finally, is that we have men on stage. And because this is primarily still a white dominated genre, they're saying, hey, like, don't do this. If this happens, come and talk to security, talk to someone like our merch person, and we'll get it taken care of. And it's really good that they're finally taking some type of initiative because these are also people who are unfortunately going to be heard first before anybody else, it seems, because you can say, "Oh, I'm a girl and I was sexually assaulted, like dead ass this happened," or be like, but what were you wearing? What did you do?" But if a white guy were to say it, they'd be like, "Oh my god, he must be telling the truth miraculously." And then they'll listen to them more. So, I mean, that's an unfortunate reality, I feel, in our society. But I also think we need to say that more and be like, listen, you guys have more of a listening range than we do. You really need to be able to take this torch and help us project this further and then step back when it comes to a point where, women, POCs, anybody else, gender, non-binary are able to be seen in this forefront and be like, okay, I need to be taken seriously now. And it's because these white male men in these dominant positions have, taken the time out to be supportive and to say, I'm going to help you guys. And I think that's a large thing that people aren't open to because they said, oh, I want to be heard. And it's like, okay, but we need the assistance of these people at this point in time, unfortunately. It's just the reality of it.
So what do we do? So that
Do
they
you-
don't have to be the
and
ones.
I guess on that topic too, I mean, maybe this is my assumption, but do you guys have a lot of men coming to you as a resource for what they can do? I mean, I know that obviously, Matt, you're doing your part for all white men. That's
Amazing.
I'm holding up all the white men.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that.
We're failing. Fuck
Oh,
you.
100%. 100% we are failing. But I mean, do men come to you guys? Like, do men come to you and they say, hey, I want to be an advocate. I don't want to just not be a creep at shows. I want to come and volunteer. I want to join you guys. I want to be a part of this fight with you. Like, do straight white men really, like, are they coming out of their position of power? I put in quotes. You can only see it on the video version, but
Air
I'm putting quotes because I don't think it's a fake power. But are white men saying, like, yes, I'm going to become a part of the solution and not just be standing in the back and saying I didn't see anything, or I'm not going to be that person, so therefore everything is okay?
We are definitely, primarily the people that are coming to our table are women, and I like the people that are engaging with this conversation are women. We 100% have men come by and they're like, this is interesting, I care about this, I want to do something. But our volunteer base is primarily women. But it is a slow growing process. It's like I'm talking to the men in my life about this, and they know that they can like come to me and talk to them. It's like a weird, unfortunate thing that a lot of like our volunteers, like male partners, are like, oh, like I am like, because I've heard my partner talk about this all the time, like now I'm interested because it's like what is like Matt Damon or Ben Affleck who's like, oh my God, I can't believe this would happen to my daughter. It's like it's like men should not have to realize that like they need to like love, like that they love or
That
came from a woman that like
therefore
that that like that is the justification of being
I
good
learned
to
that
women.
women exist.
So
And I guess they
therefore
should be
changed my
respected.
So I
opinion.
showed up.
I showed up.
I came through and I said, "What's up?"
But
So I brought myself and my junk here because I learned that women exist.
I care now. But so I think it's a longer process, but we're talking to men like, and I hope that like as we are continuing to engage, that more men will show up to be discussing this issue. We have like men buy t-shirts and like they're down, but it's just a longer process and it's a longer thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's we're in like a challenging position right now where I do want to like sort of, I don't know, celebrate when dudes come up and they're like, I want to buy your shirt, I want to like spread your message, this is so great, and they get really hyped. Like I want to be like, yes, please do this. But then at the same time, I don't want to celebrate it because I'm like, you should just be doing this. Like you shouldn't, you don't,
Right.
you almost don't deserve for me to like hype you on this.
Like
you know,
don't need congratulations anymore. Like any person that's like comes up and they're like, wow, Matt, you're really doing this. It's like, all right, cool. Like I don't feel like that. It doesn't make me feel validated. I'm just like, all right.
I feel like
Yeah.
everyone should be doing this because this is how you not be a shitty person.
It's like high-fiving someone for doing their basic human job.
Literally.
Exactly. No, that's exactly
Like,
it.
Whoa, you held the door open for an older lady?
Yeah.
Good job. Like, no, I should do that. That'd be rude.
You got out of bed, brushed your teeth, and advocated against sexual violence against women. Congratulations, you're a person.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah. And like also too, like, let's be real, like like cis white dudes don't get the same congratulations for doing this work.
It's like the same shit with like parenting. Like if you're a male who's like carrying the kid around or like pushing the stroller or doing anything, it's like the cute dad stuff. It's like how often are we being like, yo, it's a cute mom? Like
Yeah.
like it's
Well,
like
the fact that like dad bod is like a cute funny thing.
Yeah.
And mom
Yeah.
bod is like
It's like, how dare she not immediately be a size 0 as soon as she just had this child and has been caring for it for like 3 months.
this is a good plug for that Beyonce Vogue article, right?
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Beyonce had like really good statements about like motherhood and like bouncing back from pregnancy and like
And
the real
embracing her bod.
yeah, and the realness of bodies.
Yeah. What about bodies?
Let's talk about Beyonce.
Oh my God.
Beyonce, one of the top punk rock artists of all time.
Oh, yeah. She is raising all of her children in a genderless environment, though. I did just read an article about that this morning.
I know that.
Gotta check that on my Twitter.
and she's vegan.
I did see
So
that.
good for Beyonce because I can't do that.
Yeah, no. I can't sing that good either. Even in karaoke.
Even in your band.
Karaoke band.
Ooh.
I think it was one show we actually like our guitarist I think started playing Crazy in Love. And I was like,
That's a bop.
cut that shit out. And then
You're
it's
you're
like,
wrong.
Rude.
I know. Listen,
He understands he can never
You
be as good as
intimidated.
I was
Beyonce.
intimidated. I was like, I'm not gonna do the full job that I need to do here. I can't.
Yeah.
I cannot
Yeah.
achieve the level of success that you want me to achieve right now. You're putting me in a position where I cannot succeed, and I would prefer to be in a position of playing Ocean Avenue by Yellowcard again. So
There you go.
let's
That's
do
where
that
that's where
instead.
you do like the true like emo like hardcore thing where you like throw the mic into the crowd.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
You guys
You're
do
like,
it.
I can't.
I
You got
need your
this.
assistance.
can I hear you?
Why are you crazy in love, motherfuckers? Anyway.
You said yes. Here you go.
You said yeah. There you
Your
go.
turn now.
Consent.
I just take the mic back real quick.
And that's what consent is.
Ah, goddamn. So it's like, yeah. I'm glad that we can have at least a little bit of like off-topic laughter and like, hey, let's get back to it. So
This
anyway.
is our lives. I
We're
mean,
down.
we're
Yeah, I know.
constantly joking.
See, and I'll say like, as straight white man, this isn't a conversation that I necessarily have all of the time. As somebody who I always worry when you're like, oh, I'm not a creep. I've never done this stuff. And then it's like the Curb Your Enthusiasm song as they like post like a bunch of tweets and shit. And it's like,
yeah.
no, I like haven't, but like also like don't go through my Twitter. It's like find something. I'm about to be James Gunned. So
Oh my god.
I promise I'm trying to do better. I think that
Mhm.
like we are living in a society where it's like you are like so afraid of saying like, hey, I made a mistake, and you're actually taking ownership over it, because it's like so many people are just like, well, yeah, fuck you, I did say that. And you're like no, just like be like, yeah, I'm growing, I'm changing.
Mhm.
When I was 16, I did dumb shit. Like I maybe I've been rude to a partner, maybe I've been disrespectful, like, and own it and say like, hey, I'm trying to get better.
Mhm.
Because like we are not like myself, like I am growing and changing and trying to be a better person. Like shout out to going to therapy, like
Woohoo.
everyone should go to therapy, find your local cool therapist. But like we need to create those spaces of like moving and changing and
Mhm.
being willing to hold yourself accountable, because if you're unwilling to hold yourself accountable, no one else is going to do it. Like if I fuck up and don't believe that I fucked up, Maggie's not going to be willing to be like, oh, like I'm going to like help you through this when I'm not listening to myself.
Yeah.
And that also I feel goes into the effect of like cancel culture, where you see a lot of people who are like, oh, they like dig up tweets from when these people were like 15 or 16. And then they're like, oh no, this person's about to lose all their sponsorships because of something they said like literally 10 years ago. And they're like, I'm a significantly different person. And I've seen that happen where people own it, but they're still canceled. Like, how do
Mhm.
you feel like we should be really reacting to that?
Yeah, I feel like that's so like a quick lesson in accountability. Just like kicking somebody out of a community or whatever, a school, is not going to help them understand why what they did was wrong. So, sort of step one in accountability is naming the harm. Step two is acknowledging how you affected that person or that community, whatever it is. And then step three is making some commitments to change your behavior. And if your response as a community is like, okay, you're done, you're out, you're canceled, you are not giving that person any opportunity to actually be accountable. In fact, you're making it easier for them to just be like, well, they're all dicks and I did nothing wrong ever, and screw them, and then to just continue to do that harm like elsewhere. Like I feel like as someone who grew up in, DIY punk music and stuff, like in a small scene, I saw that over and over and over, just like people being terrible and then they just move and go be terrible somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it just goes on forever.
And so I think what has also happened with like the Me Too movement or all of these things is that we have pushed all of this stuff together. So like the harm that Aziz Ansari like committed is different than the harm that Louis C.K.
Mhm.
committed.
Mhm.
They both need to be taking a step back and holding themselves accountable, but those look differently. Like if it feels safer to push out like the abuser who's being violent, like you need to protect yourself first, but that is different than when someone tweets something that's harmful 10 years ago.
Mm.
And but we need to be like learning and educating ourselves about what we want to do and how we feel safe and comfortable at these various things. Like this person can be shitty in one way and in a different way, and those responses need to be learned to be different because we can't when we lump everyone in together, we are not growing.
Mm.
Like because we're not being like, oh well, how is this going to change and how are we supporting this person and how are we doing this? Because with like a lot of the cancel culture or all of that, like the call out culture, how often are we listening to the survivor and them saying like, hey, like I just want to know that like when this person is going to come to this bar. Like that's what I want. Like I am not trying to get them to like lose their job or anything like this. I just want them to be away. And also like just plugging it in for the white men, like you keep bouncing back, like we keep bouncing back. It is not like your life is ruined when one person calls you out. Like it's not like you're like you will be fine. Get over it. Like you're gonna continue to like I'm sorry that you like lost your sponsorship or like people don't like your shows don't sell out anymore. Like you will continue to be fine. Like we need to that needs to be the first thing because it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, oh, you lost your like Sprite sponsorship. Like, oh, you lost your like Reverb sponsor. Like, whatever the fuck it is, it's like you will be fine. Like,
Can I plug another podcast on your podcast?
Sure.
Is that
No, we're
gauche?
competing with everybody. No,
There's-
please do. Please
There's
do.
a really, really good episode of the podcast Invisibilia, which is run
Mhm.
by NPR, about call out culture, specifically in Richmond, Virginia, in like their DIY punk scene.
Oh.
It came out maybe like 2 months ago or something, but it's really, really good because it's like the interviewer is talking to a person who was pushed out like very vocally,
Mhm.
and also a psychologist who studies like what exclusion from your community like does to your brain and your health. And so it's a really interesting perspective.
Hmm.
Plug.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, so I'm gonna go listen to that.
Well, I think something, especially in the past like week or so, where the Orwells, the whole entire incident that came out with them, with I think it was like 2 or 3 members of their band were soliciting underage sex and were sexually aggressive towards their fans as well. And then also that a Somersault, another indie rock band, where one of their members was accused of being just very aggressively assaulting individuals. And I know Somersault had kicked that member out of the band, but it also was worded like we we knew, but we didn't do anything, and we're sorry, but he's out of the band, so it's okay now. And people are still calling them out on it. And the Orwells had released a statement saying, if you're a victim, message us privately and let's discuss this. And it's like, do you understand how
There's
victims
that whole
and
statement.
we never
this works? Like,
That whole statement is such trash. I want you to say what you're saying. I just want to quickly say my favorite part was when he said, "We really encourage anyone who's been victimized to come forward, but also we discourage anyone or people from believing everything they read on the internet." So basically saying like, yes, absolutely share your story, but everyone else like don't believe that.
and just so you know, to credit who started this movement, it was Twitter user Rusty at Riley Emmy. She compiled a whole entire Google Doc on all these allegations and screenshots of images as well from multiple people
I didn't
who
see that.
have experienced this. A lot of it mainly coming from their lead singer, Mario Cuomo.
Mhm.
So just good job, Rusty. I know that they have been getting a lot of, backlash from it.
Yeah.
but, they did the right thing. They're really trying to push forward, so just make sure you try to be chill with people when it comes to this, especially because the Orwells don't really seem to be taking a lot of responsibility for it
Mhm.
whatsoever or at all. I will say shout out to the Twin Peaks dudes because they completely said like, "Hey, we want to make sure our shows are safe. If you have ever felt like it has never, not been safe, well, like let's discuss it and we'll try to find a resolution." They completely denounced the Orwells and everyone took down anything that was associated with them if they had worked together on a project as well.
Mhm.
So, and I think the other issue is too is that now people are saying, "Hey, the indie scene here in Chicago is very boys club culture." So it's also calling out saying, "Hey, you white men, you have to be more aware that this is going on and not just be like, oh, but he's just like that," because that's what's been happening with the
Mhm.
Orwells and some of these other bands for the last few years.
Mhm.
And, it does bubble up and now all these accusations are coming out all at once.
I just want to go back and just say that like we do not ever advocate for putting an abuser and like the person who experienced harm in the same room or in the same email thread or whatever. Like that is not how problems are solved. It's not like because the power dynamics are real and that is not going to fix anything. So just like the Orwells being like, oh well, you can email us. It's like no, that's like bullshit. Like because like you are going to continue to manipulate this situation.
Mhm.
And I think what we're like with this accountability piece that we're like getting back to is that you need to be willing to like hold yourself accountable for the accountability process to start.
Mhm.
So it's not like the Orwells releasing a statement or whomever releasing a statement that's not like accountability. Like, so it's not like, all right, like, well, we're now like starting like the accountability clock, like in 3 months, like in
In
3 months,
we're good.
like you're good. Like, that doesn't mean that like, just because like Aziz Ansari or Louis C.K. like disappear for a little bit, or like who knows when Kevin Spacey will be back, or like
He made
Woody,
$126 like
yeah.
last weekend. So I
Yeah,
mean,
in
he's
his
doing
opening
great.
movie, so.
But like, who knows that like when those people are going to be back, but just like being away as like also as a celebrity, like you can take time off.
Yeah.
Like you can like
You can afford
you
to
can
take
afford
time
to
off.
afford to
Yeah.
take time off.
If you handled your money well, you can definitely
Yeah.
afford to take time off.
So it's like that does not equal like time does not like equal like absolvement of the like crime or whatever. It's like how are you actually moving forward? Like who has your back and who is like saying that oh you have like grown and changed and you're working on this and
Mhm.
you cannot like Aziz Ansari probably should not continue to do a show about relationships and love without clearly acknowledging that like violence is taking place.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, my roommate last night we were talking about the Louis C.K. stuff and I think she put it really well. She was like, I'm all for him releasing a statement and acknowledging that he needs to do work and I'm all for him doing that work and I think that's great. I just don't think that he should get to make $1 million anymore. She was like, I just don't think that he should get the privilege of showing
Mhm.
up at a place and then being handed a check anymore. Like I just don't feel like that's like out of the cards now, you know? Like I don't hate him. I don't think he's like a monster, but I just don't
Mm.
think that he should get paid to just exist anymore.
Do you think is it I agree with you about the time thing where it's like I'm gonna take time away. I wonder if they think that it's like if it's out of the media for a while, if it just it's out of people's minds, and so they see you again and they're like, ah, he did that thing, but it's like
Yeah.
whatever. And I don't know if that's like I don't know how that makes sense to anybody.
Mhm.
I agree with you that I saw a lot of things saying like he hasn't released a real apology. He's never really owned up for his actions. I mean, he did release something where he said everything is true that these women are saying, and obviously, but he never apologized to the victims. He never did really anything to I don't want to say absolve him of it because it's not like he's ever absolved. This is on his record for the rest of his life. But it
Mhm.
is, I wonder, and I'm asking you guys because I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but you know, is there a point at which someone who was doing these things, who has caused sexual violence, sexual harassment, who has done this to someone, is there a time where they do get to come back? and that, could be years, it could be after certain actions, it could be, as you're saying, like, they do, they do something where you can see that they're doing, their work to become a better person. But do you feel like there is a time where these people do get to come back in any capacity?
Um,
That's a big question.
that's a big question.
It's it and
No, and
I don't know
yeah,
how to answer it either,
no,
so
there's
I'm like,
and
let's
there's
just
there's not a clear cut answer, and there's not like I think that whether or not someone like can come back, I think that the feeling is that they can come back and that they're entitled to everything that they previously had.
Mhm.
So it's like, sure, if you have been abusive and then you like have the fan base and you have the money to like release another record, like I'm that's fine. But then like when every like when they're like, oh, this isn't selling well, or oh, like, where are all my fans? Or oh, like I'm gonna do like this press release without ever mentioning like the harm. Like what I was reading a lot with like the Louis C.K. thing, which is like this like current, like,
yeah.
because it's like every day, like more things come out, but like Louis C.K. didn't mention like being away, like didn't like enter in and being like, hey, like I am really like I want to honor all of these like female comics, or like I want to do this or I want
Mhm.
to do this. It's like, no, I'm just gonna show back up.
Mhm.
Like, so I have not seen as of yet someone like release a statement, take time, do the work, and then like come back in a more natural sense
Mhm.
without this expectation and be like, hey, some of my fans will never like me again, and that is okay.
Mhm.
And like if you want to see that I've like grown and changed and stuff, like that's important. Like, but it's up to the fans, and you need to be okay with like losing fans. And we want to be very clear that all of these folks who have been called out, or most of these folks, have not like gone ahead and admitted that they were wrong before they were called out.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
what would it look like if an artist is like, hey, I like recognize that in my past I've really done like harmful things, and here's all of these significant steps that I'm making, and I'm not going to release a record for a while,
Mhm.
but I'm working on me. And so this is like before anything comes out.
Right.
Like, how are you naming that you were harmful rather than being like, oh, this person like called me out?
Or more
And
like,
I got
That.
caught.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna
Exactly.
say more
Oh,
like
shit.
it caught up to me.
Yeah.
Now I have to confront it.
Mhm.
So maybe that is also part of that. The answer to that question is like, how can someone sort of re-enter? Maybe part of that is, um, acknowledging before there's like a huge shitstorm around them where they have no choice but to acknowledge it, and then committing to do the work from there. But yeah, I mean, I wish that there was some example of someone who's done it well, but there's just not.
Mm-hmm.
The only one that comes to mind at all of somebody who kind of came out of it so far has been Dan Harmon, which I think we talked about maybe a couple episodes ago, where he addressed it to one of the writers that worked on Community with him, and she and him, I don't know if it was direct or what it was, but he wrote a really long apology where he sort of acknowledged what his actions were and how she took it, and that he was wrong, and that he was going to take some time to sort of acknowledge what he did wrong to her. And she accepted his apology and accepted that, this is somebody who obviously wants to be better, and it's no one that I, you know, want to, I don't know, continue. It's hard to say because I'm like, I don't know the situation entirely, but from
Mhm.
what it seemed like, from what was shown, that she had forgiven him for the actions, and I don't know all of what had really been done. I think it was more or less just harassment in the workplace. Nothing as bad as Harvey Weinstein, like we're saying. Like it's not equal in some ways, but at the same time, she felt the way she felt. He acknowledged that her feelings were valid and that he had done wrong. And I don't think that he doesn't do as much anyway.
Yeah.
Mostly I see him on Instagram doing workout videos, which are really
Oh.
funny because he's like bigger dude and he's like trying to get more healthy. But he just kind of said, I'm gonna focus on myself, and I'm not gonna be as out there as I was, and we should be listening to victims in the same case, and I've done wrong, and I'm going to improve myself. Aside from him, I haven't really seen anything. I've mostly just seen men trying to come back from it, and it seems like everybody is on the same page of saying, like, "You're not there yet." Like, you
Mhm.
wanna come back, but you're not ready to yet.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting too because you do have people who they are in that, "Oh, I got caught" moment, but then there are also people who are like, they legitimately sometimes I feel don't know what they did was wrong because maybe
Mhm,
they were that young and they just didn't know any better.
Mhm.
So I think in that instance, it is like it should have been like a Dan Harmon. I feel like that would be a good reaction for people to be like, "Hey, I didn't know because I was young or whatever happened. I did stupid shit. I need to go focus and get better on it. I realize now that this is wrong and I need to progress forward." But I think there's also just a lot of situations where people are gonna come up and say, like, it has a variant to it,
Mhm.
because not every single case is going to be the same,
mhm,
and if it was, it would make it a little bit easier for us to be like, "Hey, like, this is how we react to it." But because there's so many, like, facets to it, I think that's also where it falls up, where there's a lot of people who are saying, "I don't know, how should I react? Like, this is the correct way, this isn't." And then there's cancel culture, and then you have millions of other people on the internet saying their own 2 cents, whether it's, intelligent or not. So, I think it's something that we really need to kind of be more transparent towards and be open to hearing different sides of stories as well at the same time.
And I think I would also just add to that, like, always, always, always deflect back to the person who was harmed. Because kind of like what you were saying before, Matt, like, um, if the person who was harmed in that situation was like, "You know what? Like, they apologized to me. I feel good about it. Like, I don't want to drag them through the dirt. Like, it's cool." Then that sort of like reentry process is going to look a lot different, you
mhm,
Mhm.
know? But I think often what ends up happening is that everyone sort of picks up their pitchforks and their torches against this
mhm,
person, and the person who is actually most affected gets completely like
mhm,
washed out of the whole process. And so I think that like it also really, really depends on how they feel about it and how much exposure they want to have and how much involvement they want to have in the whole process.
And what I've been starting to think about is like these people have friends, these people are in a community, these like abusers are not like don't just like crawl out of the woodwork. Like, you know,
Out of
we're
the sewer.
Yeah, out of the
I
little
know.
the little dark cave
So
hole.
so we have a responsibility to be talking to our friends. We have a responsibility to be talking to our community, like first and foremost. Like the internet is a thing, like we all do this, but like who are your people and who will you be willing to go up to and say like, "Hey, I think that you're acting in a harmful manner," because most of the folks that have been called out who are being abusive, it's not like this first act of violence, like this isn't their first act of
mhm,
violence. Like this is these repetitive acts that have been normalized and no one has said anything. And where are we engaging on that? Because like cool, like I hope that some like, abusers feelings are hurt by their fans like on Twitter turning their back on them, but like where are their friends saying like, "Hey, you fucked up. Like you are doing this wrong. Like you need to be taking a step back before this gets public, like before these things happen because we want to keep this in the community. We want to like I care about people enough to like work with them if they have been called out for being abusive.
mhm,
But that's because I care about them.
Mhm.
I don't care about like Louis CK. I don't care about R. Kelly. I don't care about like these like people who are violent because they're not in my community. These are not my
right,
friends. These are not like my people. I want to like go to my neighbor. I want to go to my friend. I want to go to my partner. I want to be like, "Hey, these actions were harmful. What can we do? Like, how can I help you?" Because once it like starts getting larger, it's like, well, how are you like bringing it back to thinking like, how is the person who experienced the violence feeling?
mhm,
Yeah, and also too acknowledging that like sexual violence doesn't happen. Someone doesn't just wake up in the morning and decide they're gonna like perpetrate harm, right?
Yeah.
It's all of these little things that sort of add up that make them believe that this is gonna be okay behavior to do. Like, and thinking about drawing, like, kind of circling it back to music very specifically when we think about, so like I will admit that the Jessie Lacey news of Brand New was very hard for me because I was a little baby lover of Brand New.
No.
But so when we think about like the fact that like all of their most of their songs are not just about like women who wronged him, but about like explicit accounts of like murdering women who wronged him and things like
Yeah.
that. And like, so when you write that song and then it sells a bajillion records and then you have everybody in the audience singing it back to you, you're like, oh, so having this idea that I get to like poison any woman who's ever bummed me out is that's cool. We're all co-signing that that's an okay thing, an okay like attitude to have. Great. So then it's just like a tiny step from there to think like, okay, so actually acting out some of this stuff is probably cool too, right? Yeah? Cool. Okay. So now I'm going to take another tiny step and actually like cause some like serious harm, serious damage, right? And that whole process can happen over the course of like a person's entire career, or it can happen over the course of like one record, you know?
Mhm.
And so, kind of echoing what Matt was saying, like when there are bands who are putting out songs like that, like being conscious of that stuff and thinking about and thinking critically, like, you know, I realize this is just like these are lyrics and you can like quote unquote air quotes separate like, you know, the art from the artist or whatever, but like can you though? Like you know, like does that also mean that you're kind of co-signing on this
Mhm.
behavior?
Right, and I feel like, for example, the lead singer Aiden William Control, he had huge allegations against him about having a sex cult where he was also grooming underage girls, which is incredibly fucked up. And there's a whole website that shows all this photos, very graphic photos and graphic accounts of him with women or him even with screenshots talking to underage girls and how manipulative he's going to be. However, his original band came from a horror punk background where you do hear those like this common theme of like murder and violence and telling just very grotesque type of stories through their lyrics. So I think it's also, is this the right content to be putting into even this music scene? I feel like at some points as well, because I know that there's also been examples of the Orwell songs pulled, and they're like, listen to Body in a Bayou, listen to Halloween All Year. And it's like, okay, for me, because I also listen to horror punk, some of these lyrics don't affect me as much, I feel, because I used to listen to Aiden before this whole thing came out, and I'm like, oh, they're talking about like people dying and like Elizabeth Bathory and how she like killed people and everything. So for me, that's normal. But I feel for people who, for example, are in that indie scene, they're looking at it and they're like, who the fuck is singing this? When you really look at it, I also think just looking at that and saying, is this the right content to be putting out for these people to consume, especially if they're not used to it? Because I feel like a lot of people are going to negatively react and be like, oh, that's really fucked up. Why are you singing about that, bro?
I think like media literacy is so important. Like, regardless of what you're watching, what you're finding, like music, movies, TV, whatever, like so much of it is fucked up. It's like, how are you navigating it and saying like, cool, like I really like Fast and Furious, like probably not promoting all of the
Do
best
you?
I do.
Oh my
Yo,
Fun facts here.
Vin Diesel.
It's a fine series.
Stop.
Wonderful
It's
series.
fine.
So,
Family entertainment.
Oh my god.
but like, what does that mean? Like, are these gender roles like still being perpetuated? Like, what is missing? Like, what? And it's okay for me to be like, hey, I'm gonna watch this, but I'm also still gonna be like, wow, that was like fucked up. Like, and you can do that, but it's like when these things are like constantly arriving, and you're like, oh, like over and over and over again, these people have been called out for doing these harmful things, or this was like a super like unsafe environment or like harmful environment or anything. Like, you get to choose like when you're going to step back, and that it is up to you. And like I can't make a decision for every person. Like, I'm gonna ask the DJ not to play an R. Kelly song because I don't want to listen to that. Like, I'm not gonna go watch Woody Allen movies. Like, but if you're like, yo, this is my favorite movie, I'm gonna be like, yeah, Woody Allen's sort of a creep,
Yeah.
and be like, that's it. Like, I'm not. You get to pick your battles, and you get to decide when you are going to like dig into like being like, this thing is shitty, this thing is shitty, because we can go around and be like, I just referenced like Smashing Pumpkins earlier, and like
Yeah.
Billy Corgan like clearly created an unsafe environment like in his like music scene,
Mhm.
like, or in his like band and that culture. Like, I'm gonna sing those like zero lyrics, but I'm not gonna like pay money to like
Yeah.
do anything about it. So it's like, where are you putting your money? Where are you like supporting things? You need to self reflect, because it's not like my decisions are different than your decisions. And that's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so just to kind of wrap things up here, I want to talk a bit about your organization, Our Music, My Body, and just kind of give our listeners an idea of where to go to support you guys, to volunteer with you. Yeah, anything you want to say about your organization and what you guys are doing?
Our Music, My Body, out here in Chicago all the time. If you're going to music festivals, we were probably there. So say what's up to us. If you're at Riot Fest, we'll be there. Come make a button made by Busy Beaver Buttons. But we have a website, ourmusicmybody.tumblr.com. We're on all the social medias, and you can follow us, and I think that's the best way to keep in touch with us. I think our mission of the organization is, or the campaign, is to make people feel safe and comfortable at festivals, that everyone deserves to be able to go to a festival and not be harmed or bothered. It's been interesting having this conversation today, talking about sort of the celebrity aspect of like sexual violence, but like Our Music, My Body is here to talk about sexual violence and violence that's happening between fans. Because while like maybe the Me Too movement hasn't fully enveloped the music scene, it certainly is not being talked about from like the peer-to-peer relationships, and that's what we are like down to like be talking about and caring about.
Yeah. I know that you guys are solution based. We kind of talked about that in the beginning of finding more solutions to these issues and how this problem is going to actually be solved. Which I don't know if you guys have anything that people can do aside from volunteering with you, aside from being a part of the movement with you. Is there anything specifically you would say to people that they can do within their own lives, within if they're at a festival and they see something within their own communities? Is there anything that you guys think that people should be doing now?
Yeah, I mean, we come from a sort of restorative justice or like bystander intervention framework. And all I mean by that is like we really do feel that like it's up to all of us to hold each other accountable and to say something if someone is being out of line or if someone is invading someone's space, and it's up to us to also support each other. And so I feel like the best thing that you can do, the number one thing you can always do no matter what, is believe survivors, believe people when they tell you that things have happened to them, that people have been grimy to them, believe them and like be there for them. But then step 2, I guess, is to be willing to step up if you see, and if it feels safe for you and you see someone being out, like stepping out of line, or you see someone who's really uncomfortable, like feel like it is your job to step up to them. I was a bartender for a really long time, and it's just like it can be as simple as just saying like, "Yo, dog, I don't think that person wants to talk to you." Like it can be super easy, and like knowing that it is our responsibility as a community, and especially thinking about music and like again, growing up in a super super teeny tiny DIY scene, Indianapolis, if you're wondering. It's very cool. Growing up in a super tiny DIY scene, it's like I really like part of what I loved was the feeling of like these are my people. Like I didn't have punk people that went to my high school. My parents were not stoked on it. Like, so when I would go to shows, I was like, these are my people. This is my place, right? And so like take that to the next level and like realize that, it's also your job to keep that space like safe from harm. And we all are responsible for that.
Yeah, I think um on like the broader spectrum of things, I think what Maggie's saying is like fantastic, like for the interpersonal stuff. And then like the outward focus is like ask your festival like what they're doing. Like ask like go to a training by a local nonprofit, like an anti-violence agency. Like we are always like promoting stuff, but we're not like we don't have the money to like be doing all of the things. So like look into what you can do to like go to a training or go to something cool. It's time to wake up. Check out your local nonprofits. Like Between Friends, Resilience, we're like out doing things. Other nonprofits in the area, like see what's going on. Like if you're in Chicago, ICA, Chicago Freedom School, they're doing cool things. Good Kid, Mad City is doing great things. Like you want to be aware of what is happening in your communities and what people are talking about. Um, and then being able to ask festivals like, hey, like what are you doing to address sexual harassment? And then when they're like, well, we have this statement, they're like, all right, cool. Like, who's doing staff trainings for you? Like, what do I actually do if something happens? Like, that statement is just the first step. So that's what we want from the broader perspective.
Yeah. Step 1, believe survivors. Step 2, show up for your community. Step 3, start asking questions and show up for the folks who are doing the work on the ground.
Are there any venues or festivals that you guys work with pretty consistently that you want to like celebrate for what they've done? Or I don't know, maybe it's still like a work in progress with everybody. I mean, obviously no one is gonna be it's not solved yet. It's still something that we need to solve. But is there anybody that we want to say thank you to for the work that they've done in the music scene, Chicago, elsewhere, locally or globally?
Um, I think that all of the festivals that we work with know that there are more stuff out.
Mm.
Like that it is not um but we love that this is going to be our third year at Riot Fest. So we like respect that they have valued us from day one. Be Kitchen and Subterranean, the folks at Kickstand Productions, have really shown us a lot of love, and have been there and have been willing to call us when something happens, which has been really nice. Um, the people at Lincoln Hall and Shubas, who are like the Audio Tree folks,
Mhm.
have been really good to us recently. Um, oh yeah. Um, And so there are folks that are doing things. We're excited to be at Audio Tree Fest. It was wonderful to be at Firefly Music Festival in Delaware that they asked us to be there. Was really important. So those are the pieces that we're sort of excited sharing.
And on September 4th, Jubas is hosting a benefit show for us that we had little to nothing to do with. They
Oh,
just
wow.
decided to do it, which is tight. And other important dates to keep in mind. We have our next volunteer training on September 26th. September 26th and September 29th are our next volunteer training. So if you've listened to this and gotten real stoked, go on to any of our, like Matt said, any of our social media or our website, and it has links to how to apply to be a volunteer. If you enjoyed our joke, know that we as individuals run the social media, so there's plenty
we got
more.
of them.
There's plenty more. So follow us for those. Yeah, all the spaces that work with us. I think a shift that's happened recently is that it went from us being like, "Yo, pay attention. You have an issue and we want to help you," to them really being more thoughtful and like trying to bring us in a bigger way.
I'll make sure that we in our show notes for the podcast and on our social media, we'll link to all of your stuff as well,
Cool.
just so everybody can find that information there as well. Yeah, if you have any final thoughts at all that you want to mention.
I just want to thank you guys so much for coming on out and having a really good discussion about something that I feel is still somewhat taboo to express to a certain extent with people.
Yeah.
Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
for having us. Always happy. Come say what's up. You
Yeah.
know.
If you see us at a show, come say hi. If you want to shout out the podcast, that'd be tight. We'll pass that info along to you.
I will say that September 4th show, Rookie is playing and they slap. So you should definitely go for that other reason as well. And of course to follow of course to support our music, my body, but also Rookie slaps.
Good to know.
I didn't know the term slap was a positive.
It is.
The song
is.
Learning
slaps
so
or
much.
yeah. Listen.
Are you gonna go?
I'm hoping
Pressure's
I hope I can go. It depends on my work schedule.
That's real.
fair.
Go to the show. We won't be there.
We'll be watching.
I'll be there.
There you go.
Matt, Maggie, thank you so much for being on the Emo Social Club. And see you around. Looks to camera, throws up peace sign. Bye.